Okay. If you look up at the screen, you will see an interesting character. His name is spelled O-T-Z-I. It is not pronounced Otzi. It is not pronounced Otzi. That's about all I can tell you about how not to pronounce it. It's easier to tell you how not to pronounce it than it is to tell you how to pronounce it, because as it turns out, after all of my research on the subject, I found 3 pronunciations that are all seem to be considered proper. The reason that I say that they seem proper is that I have heard expert after expert, highly intelligent, highly educated people, one after another, each using one of these 3 pronunciations. So since they're smarter, more intelligent, and more educated than I am, I'm going to assume that any one of these 3 are legit. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for different pronunciations. Those pronunciations, by the way, are Otzi, Etzi, and Utzi. I like Utzi. The reason that there are 3 pronunciations is because there are different languages involved. If you look at where we found Otzi, Otzi is someone we found. We found him here. Over here, there is a border between Austria and Italy. And right on the border, well, 300 feet south of the border, 300 feet into the Italian area, is where we found a corpse. So we found Otzi in the Utztal Alps, and so we call him Otzi for short after where we found him, right? So what language do they speak in Switzerland? It's called Swiss German. It's a form of German, but it's very different. Austria, they speak German. Italy, they speak Italian. 3 different languages, 3 different pronunciations, thus Otzi, Etzi, and Utzi. Make sense? So there's your pronunciation problem solved. Which is which, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so different pictures of the same place. There's the crosshairs is right where we found Otzi, right there. This is that there were some hikers hiking up right here, and where you're looking. And they look over and they see something and they go, oh, I think some other hikers must have dropped some trash. We're environmentally responsible people, let's go pick it up. And they go over there to pick up this trash, and what they found was not trash. This is what they found. That is Otzi, a human being stuck. Most of his body is encased in ice. The top part of his body is sticking up out of the ice. His face is face down in a puddle of water that used to be ice but has recently melted. So we found an Iceman, a person who was encased in ice. Now, what do they think that they found here? Well, it's pretty common for people to go up into the mountains on a hike and get lost and disappear, and we never see them again. Only every now and then one of their bodies turns up, and we know it's a hiker who got lost. So that's what they figure this is. And they see, and by the way, it doesn't look like rock, like he's sticking up out of rock, right? It almost looks like he was a character on Star Trek, and they beamed him into, and he got materialized half in rock and half out. It's almost what it looks like, right? But no, that's actually ice with dirt on it. It's just dirty ice. And so he's completely frozen there. So they say, well, we'll dig him out. And so the woman, one of the hikers was a man and a woman, and they grab a stick that was laying nearby, and they start chiseling, trying to get the ice, to chisel away so they can get him out. Well, that stick that she picked up was not a stick. It wasn't just a stick. It was a 5,300-year-old artifact that museum curators would probably appreciate if he wouldn't use it as an ice pick, please. Right? I mean, it was she probably damaged it. It was part of Otzi's gear, which we'll talk about in a moment. Okay, so they start trying to get him out, and they realize, okay, we're never going to get him out of here. Besides, the authorities require that if you find a corpse, you got to tell them. So we're going to go down. So they go down the mountain to the Austrian side, and they tell the cops, "We got a body up there." So the cops go, "Okay, yeah, okay. So it's a missing hiker. We'll take our. Oh, you say he's frozen in ice? Okay, well we'll take our jackhammers, and we'll go up there and we'll get him." Now you can excuse a couple of hikers who knows what they did for a living, but clearly they weren't cops, and clearly they weren't archaeologists. So you can forgive them for their ignorance and making mistakes. But the cops? I'm a cop, right? You come to me and you say, "Hey, I found a corpse up there in the mountains." Am I going to assume, if I'm a good cop, am I going to assume that it's a hiker who fell and had an accident? Or am I going to say, well, if it's a corpse, it's possible that he went up there with somebody who killed him, and maybe it's a crime scene? If I'm a good cop, I'm at least going to consider that possibility. Don't you think? So what do these cops do? Did they go up there and treat it like a crime scene? Actually, they didn't even treat it like people with common sense, right? Because even if I'm nobody and I have a jackhammer and you got a corpse that's solid, frozen in ice, I'm going to use my jackhammer maybe, but I'm going to use it away from the corpse, like 3 or 4 feet away from him. I'm going to hammer out all of the ice from like 3 or 4 feet around him, not right up close to him. They actually destroyed part of his hip. His left hip is completely destroyed by a jackhammer. What imbeciles. I mean, a crime scene investigator would be livid. Would go, what are you doing? You probably just destroyed evidence, right? But an archaeologist? Oh my God, can you imagine being an archaeologist, finding out that somebody jackhammered the only 5,300-year-old corpse we've ever seen? It's insane, right? And so they say, oh, well, fortunately, they were battery operated, battery powered, and they ran out of battery. God, can you imagine what would have happened if they had endless power? What kind of damage they would have done? So then they go, okay, well, obviously we're not going to get them out of the ice this way. We need to get some people up here who know how to melt ice. So they bring in more people. They wind up getting them out of the ice. This, by the way, is the couple. And I'm going to come back to this picture, but I want you to look at them and notice the stick in her hand, and there's Otzi. And
What else do they do?
oh, well, see, here's the thing. If you go to a crime scene, are you going to touch the body without gloves on?
No.
Lots of reasons not to touch a body, right? I mean, if I were up there, if they asked me, hey, we've found this body, I need help carrying it, I go, okay, I'll go help you. I might go up there, but you actually want me to touch that thing? That's like a dead body. You want me to no, I need gloves. No. Look at the guy on the left. Have you? How many of you have been on the forensic science module in this class? Raise your hand. Oh, not very many. So you're still going to rotate into it. Good. So those of you who have, do you remember something called Lockard's exchange principle? Yeah? What is that?
It's like everything you touch is going to have a mark.
Yeah, right. So when you touch something, you leave part of yourself behind. And part of what you touched is now on you. It's called Lockard's exchange principle. It's why nowadays it's like almost impossible to commit a crime and get away with it. Right? There's almost no way for me to be in this room without leaving evidence that I was in this room. All kinds of different ways. And one of them is what we call epithelials, or skin cells that come off of your hand or off of you when you touch something. This is a 5,300-year-old mummy. We want to run DNA on this mummy. When we run DNA on the mummy, we would like to know that we're actually running DNA tests on his DNA, not on the epithelials of the pot-bellied trucker who's holding him with his bare hands right now. I'm thinking he's contaminating the crime scene, or the forensic science, or the archaeological find. He's contaminated it. So now it's a little harder, got to be a little more careful now when we start doing DNA tests. Right, so basically you got a bunch of people running around here who don't know what they're doing. Finally, they get somebody up there who sees one of the things that Otzi had with him. Otzi had all kinds of really cool stuff with him. I would say Otzi was rich. Otzi was not a poor guy. He was wealthy for someone who lived back then, right? He had really cool shoes, really well-crafted shoes. He had something else that nobody else has, right? Like almost nobody else has. In his whole village, he was probably the only person who had this thing. Guess what it was? You'll never guess. Yeah?
A hoe?
A what?
A hoe.
No, but it's a really good guess. Mind you, he's 5,300 years old. They don't know this yet, right? But he has something. Go ahead.
I think it's the stick that they use to damage it.
No. Nope. Nice try. Yeah?
A bow and arrow.
No. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Okay? But check this out. They found something that looks like a cane. If you look at it, you'd say, oh, he must have been crippled. He must have needed a cane, right? Because it was a stick and it had like a handle on it. But it wasn't a cane. It was an axe. It's not a Stone Age axe because a Stone Age axe would have stone in it. And all of the artifacts that we found and everything about this scene tells us, later on when they realized all of this, everything about that scene tells us that it's the Stone Age, except that when you see this metal axe, that's when everybody starts freaking out because he goes, oh my God, this is from the Copper Age. Do you know when the Copper Age was? Have you ever heard of the Bronze Age?
Yeah.
The Bronze Age came after the Copper Age. The Copper Age was our first foray into metallurgy, right? Using metal, actually from a practical point of view. It was also happening around the Neolithic time. What is Neolithic? That's when, up until this time, we lived in the Stone Age, right? And in the Stone Age, we were hunter-gatherers, which means that we're hanging out in our cave or our teepee or whatever dwelling we live in, and we're going, what are we going to eat today? Well, let's go find out. So we're going to go out and we're going to try to kill something, or we're going to find some vegetation where we can pick the fruits from it and eat, right? So that's called hunter-gatherer. We were hunter-gatherers. The Neolithic Age is where we started to realize, hey, wait a second, this is a really cool plant, and if we plant lots of them right here and grow them right here, we don't have to go looking for it. It was amazing technology, actually. Agriculture, you don't think of it as a technology. But when you define technology as humans manipulating their environment to make their lives safe or easy, that's technology. Agriculture is absolutely technology. We say, yeah, I'm not going to just go pick a wild fruit. I'm going to cultivate it and plant it and have it here so I don't have to travel. And that means that we can do a whole huge area of land of this plant, and then that's going to attract other people, and we can all kind of hang out together and share and share our work and share our food and protect. And now we have villages, whereas before it was maybe a family here or there, right? So now we have villages. This is the Neolithic Age, right? And that's where he comes from. It was well established by then. He probably lived in a village, and he was probably one of the most important people in that village. Now, how do we know that? Well, he had a copper axe. And I'll tell you right now, very few people in that village, if anyone other than him, had a copper axe. Because it just was so rare and difficult to, right? But it gets better than that. Because with all of our modern technology, we're analyzing the scene, we find some of his hairs, and we examine his hair. And by the way, did you know that if we do a blood test on you to see if you are a drug addict, to see if you've done drugs recently, we can tell whether you've done drugs recently in the last few hours, last few days. But if we take a piece of your hair, we can tell if you did drugs in the last 3 months, right? It depends on how long your hair is, right? Carly, we could probably tell if she's done drugs in the last 6 months. This guy, I don't know, what's your name? David, we couldn't tell if David had done drugs in the last 3 weeks because he got short hair, right? But we looked at his hair, and guess what we found in his hair? Not drugs. Because whatever's in your system gets deposited in your hair. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so what do we find in his hair? We found something called arsenic. Do you know what arsenic is? It's actually a poison. It's poisonous. It's toxic. It'll kill you. But in larger quantities than he was exposed to, obviously. But still, even when you're exposed to it in small quantities, it gets deposited in your hair. Why would there be arsenic in his hair? What would that mean? What does that tell us?
He probably ate something poisonous.
No. Nice try, though.
I don't know, I had the same guess.
Yeah, I would have guessed the same thing, too. Yes?
Not poison?
What?
Not poison?
No. No, there's no foul play here in terms of the arsenic because it wasn't enough. What was in his system wasn't enough to kill him, right? Arsenic is something that is produced when you melt copper. So it comes up in fumes. He breathed it in. It's deposited in his hair. So what does that tell you? It tells you that he melted his own copper. So we have not only found a 5,300-year-old man, we've found a 5,300-year-old blacksmith who was on the cutting edge of technology. Do you understand? Copper was the cutting edge of technology, the way that your smartphone is the cutting edge of technology today. That axe was Otzi's smartphone, right? That was Otzi's drone, right? I mean, whatever, think of like some super cool modern technology, that's what Otzi had. And Otzi wasn't just a guy who went down to the Apple store and bought an Apple computer or an Apple phone. Otzi was the engineer at Apple who built it in the first place, right? He was the blacksmith who melted the copper himself. So this is an amazing thing. What are your chances of finding somebody like that in history 5,300 years ago? Like nil, right? And so this is super exciting for archaeologists. And they realize that it's a very old website or a very old site, and so they bring in the big guns, the smart people, right? And they start collecting all of these artifacts. Now, I'm going to take you back to this picture here, because the story gets really good. Are we going to run out of time? What time are we out of here? Is this 6th or 7th period?
We have 25 minutes left.
Oh, we got 25 minutes. That's a lot. It's a lot of time. So I got a lot. Good. I got plenty of time to cover this ground, I think. Okay. I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying? I was talking about this picture, right? So check this out. Okay, the thing in her hand, that stick that she was using as an ice pick, what that was is, you know, when you go backpacking, you get a lot of stuff in your backpack. It's helpful to have a backpack frame that we make out of aluminum now. He made his a frame out of wood, and that's part of the backpack frame that she has. But it's a 5,300-year-old backpack frame, okay? Not the kind of thing that you want to just treat like a shovel. It belongs in a museum where people can go, oh wow, that's cool. They actually had backpack frames back then, you know, right? So yeah, not good. Okay, but that's nothing. Look up in the top right-hand corner of the picture, and do you see the stick leaning up against the brick or the rock formation over there? Do you know what that is? That's a bow, right? Only it's not a completed bow. It's a bow that he was in the process of making when he died. It's an incomplete bow. He also had a quiver of arrows. A quiver, you know, a quiver thing you put in with all the arrows in it, right? There were 2 completed arrows. The rest of them were shafts in the making. They didn't have arrowheads, they didn't have feathers. He was in the process of making arrows, and he was in the process of making a bow when he died. Okay? Now, he did have 2 arrows. And what's interesting is that those arrows had blood on them. We believe it was human blood. What does that tell you about this guy?
Possibly died while fighting.
Could have, yeah. But at the very least, there were people who didn't like him very much, and people that he didn't like very much. Yeah.
Could have been murdered.
Could have been murdered, yeah. Yeah. But what's interesting, if you look at what I've just told you, he's in the process of making a new bow. He's in the process of making new arrows. So how did he have two arrows that already had blood on them when he didn't have a bow to fire them with? What that should tell you is that he used to have a bow that worked. And he probably had a quiver full of arrows that worked. And he shot them all. And he was only able to recover two of them after using them. And now something has happened to the bow that worked. He's fired all of his arrows, and now he's unarmed. So now he's rearming himself. He has two arrows, that's great, but he needs a bow, so he's making a bow. And he knows he's going to need more than two arrows, so he's making more arrows. These are facts. This is not conjecture. I'm just telling you what we know. We can take these facts and we can go crazy with speculation. I could write a movie, right, about what I think happened to Otzi. I sort of think a lot about doing that, actually. Okay, so now what we're dealing with is a guy who had enemies, a guy who is arming himself, a guy who is dead at 10,000 feet. Who goes 10,000 feet? Why would you go up that high? Even if you were hunting, you wouldn't go all the way up 10,000 feet. You'd stay down with the tree line where there's game, right? So why is he all the way up at 10,000 feet? Okay. Well, we get all of the artifacts together. We get him. They start treating it professionally, like archaeologists should. And now we've got a corpse that's 5,000 years old. We've got to do an autopsy. You can't do a modern autopsy on a 5,000-year-old corpse because you only get one shot at it. You know what a modern autopsy looks like? They slice and dice it, man. I mean, they cut it down the middle. They take the organs out. They cut them up. They look at them under microscopes. They put it all back in. They sew it all up. It's crazy. They cut the brain out. They zip the top of the head off. They take the brain out. They slice it up. They look at it. They put it back. They sew it all together. It's crazy, right? You can't do that to a 5,000-year-old mummy. Archaeologists will murder you for that. So if we're going to look inside of his body, we're going to have to use medical diagnostics. In other words, we're going to have to use x-rays. So they do x-rays, sophisticated x-rays, CTs. CTs are really cool forms of x-rays that can actually slice. You can actually do three-dimensional slices and look inside the body. When you do medical diagnosing, not diagnosing, that's a stupid pronunciation. So when you do medical diagnostics, what we call diagnostic imaging, right? Diagnostic meaning diagnose, right? Imaging for diagnosing. You understand the language there?
Yeah.
So when we do diagnostic imaging, we take those images and we give them to a really educated, really smart person that we call a radiologist. This really educated, really smart person is supposed to know what they're looking at when they look at these images, and they're supposed to be able to tell you what they see, and they're supposed to see things that you don't. Well, some radiologist must have looked at these images. I assume it was a radiologist who looked at the images. I wouldn't want to be him, because whoever it was completely missed the cause of death, which was staring them in the face. It's right there on the screen, right there, and they didn't see it. And it was like 10 years later. 10 years go by. And somebody looks at the image. By the way, have a look. There's what he looks like now, pretty much. They keep him frozen like this. They spray him down with sterile water on a regular basis to keep him in the state of being what's called a wet mummy. He's frozen all the time. He's kept in a freezer. They don't take him out very often, and when they do, it's only for 20 minutes at a time. Okay, and so here's them looking at him. There's another shot of him, and then there's this. About 10 years later, someone looks at the x-ray and goes, hey, what's that? What's that in that yellow circle? They circled it. What is that? Any ideas? Yeah.
Maybe you got shot with an arrow?
It got shot with, that's an arrowhead. What radiologist could look at, I mean, we're talking about, what's part of being a radiologist? It's understanding human anatomy, so that when you're looking at it, you know human anatomy, and you would look at that and go, yeah, that's not supposed to be there. I don't know what that is, but it's not a bone. It's not something that's supposed to be. A radiologist should see that. Somebody missed it. 10 years later, we finally realized, oh my God, somebody shot this guy with an arrow. Not only did they shoot him with an arrow, they were marksmen. They hit him exactly where they wanted to hit him. See, when you're a hunter and you're going to go and kill something, you don't want to wound it. You want to kill it, right? And you want to make, because if you wound it, A, it's going to suffer, and B, it's going to run, and you're going to have to track it for miles and miles. And that's a lot of work. And so you don't want to have to go through that. So when you hit this thing, you want to hit him in a spot that's going to sever an artery and kill him on the spot. And whoever shot him knew that, knew how to do it, and hit him exactly where they wanted to hit him. They did pierce the artery, and he bled out in less than 5 minutes. So we now know the cause of death. Otzi was murdered. Or, well, he was killed by another human being, let's say that. Was he murdered? I don't know. Maybe Otzi was the bad guy, and these were the cops coming after him, and they were just dispensing justice. Either way, he died at the hands of other humans. But it's hard for me to think of Otzi as a bad guy because he had skills, employable skills, he had wealth, he had position within whatever village he lived in, guaranteed. So there's little reason for him to be a criminal. And good reason for criminals to want to get him, right? Because if he had wealth, you understand? So it's easier for me to think of him as a good guy pursued by bad guys than the other way around. So now we know how he died. What else have we learned about? One of the really cool things, very exciting things that we know about what happened to Otzi is when we did all these x-rays, what's interesting is we couldn't find his stomach. You do an x-ray, you expect to see a stomach in there. It's not there. Where is it? Don't know. But what happens is, 5,000-year-old bodies, don't do well. Things inside, all of the organs inside maybe move around. And what had happened was the stomach had actually moved up under the ribs, and we didn't really see it there. So I'm thinking, so that's another thing that's evidence to me that we didn't have top-notch radiologists on the job here. I'm thinking we could have had some more competent people who could have found the stomach long before they actually found the stomach. I forget how long it was. I think it was a long time had passed before they finally said, there's the stomach. Now the cool thing is that when you're a person who does autopsies, you're very, very, very interested in what you find in the stomach. Why? Because it tells you not just what the person ate, but when they ate it, where a lot of times where they were when they ate it. There's just a lot of things you can learn about what's in the stomach, right? What did we learn when we found his stomach and we got the contents from his stomach? What do you think we found? Well, we found it. Doesn't it make sense? Let me ask you that. Well, did you know? I sound like a madman. Sorry. Did you know that when you eat something, you will poop it out about 36 hours later? It's about a 36-hour process. Did you know that? Your digestive tract is approximately a 36-hour process. That's good to know, right? It's also worth noting that your digestive processes will slow down when you're under stress. Do you think he was under stress?
Very much.
Yeah, so it's reasonable to think that it was actually more like 48 hours, right? So we have like a 48-hour window of being able to look at whatever we can find in his stomach and his intestinal tract, right? So does it make sense that whatever you find up high in the stomach is the last thing that he ate?
Yeah.
Right? That would be deer meat. He had a large meal of deer meat. Now, if you're being pursued, are you going to sit down and make yourself a large meal?
No.
I wouldn't. But I don't know. Maybe he thought he'd gotten far enough away from them and he was safe. I don't know. It's just one of those contradictory. You have to look at all the facts, not just the ones that you're interested in, right? So there's that, right? Further down, like a day earlier, he had eaten ibex, which is like goat. And further down, there was something else. But it's not what he ate that he knew he ate that matters. It's what he ate that he didn't know he ate. And what he ate that he didn't know he ate was pollen, right? This was in the spring. In the spring, pollen is everywhere. Plants just blast their pollen into the air. It's everywhere. If you have allergies, you know this, right? Well, it gets everywhere. It gets on your food and you eat it. It gets in your mouth and you swallow it. It's going to get into your intestinal tract. It's going to get in there, right? So what we can do is look at the most recent part of his stomach, the top part, and look at the pollen at the top part, and we'll know where he was when he ate that meal. Guess where he was? He was at about 10,000 feet, where the pine trees are, right? Actually, he's above the tree line. So, but whatever. All I know is there's pollen. He's up there high, right? Now, when you look at what he had eaten halfway down, right, like a day or so ago, guess where he was? The pollen tells us that he was all the way down in the valley, because it was pollen that you would find down there and not up high. Now, if that's not amazing enough for you, guess what we find when we go all the way to the bottom of his colon? 48 hours ago. 48 hours before he died. What do you think we found? What kind of pollen do you think we found there?
More pine pollen?
More pine? Okay, so what does that mean? It means that he was up here, and he traveled all the way down there, and now he traveled all the way back up there, and he did all of that in 48 hours.
Maybe you try
We're talking about 10,000 feet
in 2 days. Well, technically,
in 2 days.
if he was up there,
Down.
went down 10,000 feet,
And back up.
10,000 feet again.
Okay, but how did he get there in the first place? He obviously had to go up there. So we're talking about a real athlete here.
This man was big.
We're talking about not big, just athletic, just
Athletic.
with a lot of endurance, right? Did you know that going downhill is almost as hard, or it's actually, some people say it's harder than going uphill? You're going down 10,000 feet. That's hard work. A buddy of mine, and it's perilous, by the way. There are no sidewalks or pathways, right? A buddy of mine back when I was 16, 17. And we get in the car, and we're just crazy kids, right? We're just nuts, right? So we get in the car and we drive up to the mountains. It's a weekend, and we're just going to drive up the mountain. We don't know what we're doing. We're just going to go up there, right? So we drive up to the mountains here, like Big Bearish way, right? And we're winding our way up this mountain. Oh, we go way up. We get up there, and we decide to pull off, and we start climbing. I don't know what we were thinking. We just thought, let's start climbing. We'll just climb up there. So we start climbing. We go up, right? We're climbing. And we get up really high, and it was great. It was a great adventure. It was exciting. It was beautiful. The view was awesome. It was a lot of fun. We're coming down. Okay, gravity is saying, yeah, come down. Yeah, that's good, come down. And you're fighting gravity, trying not to come down as fast as gravity wants you to come down, right? So we come down, I get to this ledge, and now we've got to jump down about 7-8 feet to the next level. My friend jumps down, all is good. I jump down, and when I land, I'm wearing tennis shoes. When I land, there's a rock, a flat rock, sitting like this, and my foot comes down on that rock, and that rock is like a blade, and it cuts through my shoe, right, all the way on the foot, cut all the way to the bone. And we're up in the middle of nowhere. We're up in the mountains. He had to help me down the mountain. We had to get in the car, take me down to our modern hospital where they stitched me up, and all was well. But I'm just saying, when you're coming down a mountain, it's hard work. This guy goes up the mountain and down the mountain and back up the mountain again. It's insane. So we're talking about a super amazing athlete. You would think, right? The guy's got to be an incredible athlete to be able to do that. Well, in spite of having that kind of athletic ability, he was also old. He was old. Now, okay, let's look at it. That's actually a pretty accurate representation of what he looked like. Did you know that if we find a corpse, a skeleton, we can recreate their face pretty accurately? We can. We do it. It's part of forensic science. And they've done that with this. And this is pretty good accurate representation of what he looked like. Would you say that he's an old guy?
Yes.
Look at his face, does he look like an old guy? Okay. Would you say that he's younger than me?
No.
Yeah.
He's not younger than me? Is he older than me?
Yes.
He's not about the same age, maybe a little older than me, right? Do you know how old I am?
No.
In May, I'll be 60. Do you know how old he was?
No.
70?
46.
What?
46?
He had a hard life. He spent most of his life out in the sun, which is not kind to your skin. He spent most of his time outside in the cold weather. He just had a really tough life, okay? He didn't have great nutrition, okay? So, that's what he looked like. However, you look at that body and you think, yeah, that body, the guy with that body could climb 10,000 feet, no problem. I don't know about the face, right? But that body could probably climb 10,000 feet and be okay. However, when we take a close look at his body, I don't know what you know about joints, but joints are like a ball and socket, right? And there's material in there that's soft and cushiony, and that material, as you use it, hard life over time, gets worn away. He had none. He was bone on bone. That meant that every step he took was pain. He was in pain from head to toe for lots of reasons. He had really bad arthritis, bone on bone. He's walking up a mountain, right? On top of that, he has Lyme disease. On top of that, he has the bacteria that causes ulcers, and it's quite painful, right? To say that his body was in a constant state of pain is an understatement. And yet, he was able to perform these amazing athletic. Now, why would someone in that much pain endure all of that pain? Why would they put themselves through that? Well, normally I don't think you would, but if someone's chasing you with bows and arrows trying to kill you, maybe you would. We know the path that he took up the mountain, and it was not the ideal path. There are easier ways to get there. And so it's another indicator that he was being chased, and that was why he took that path. Right. So we've learned a lot about him, and we've used forensic science to do it. And the reason that I'm putting you through there's a couple of reasons that I'm putting you through this and teaching you about this. First of all, Otzi is one of the greatest archaeological finds ever. He's up there with the Great Pyramids. He is one of the great, unbelievable treasure troves that we still can't believe we had the luck to find. So it's worth knowing who Otzi is. Just as a part of, I always tell you, I want you to learn a little bit about a lot of things. This is one of those little things I want you to learn. Okay? I want you to know who Otzi is. So when it comes up in conversation, you know a lot about it, right? Or a little bit about it. I also want you to understand that we're able to know about him what we know about him because of so many different kinds of technologies. X-rays, right? Metallurgy. We were able to look at the copper and determine that it was 99.7% pure copper. We were able to look at his hair and find the arsenic in his hair. We were able to look at his stomach. And so that requires an understanding of botany. Does anybody know what botany is? Botany is the study of plants. When I was your age, in middle school, in my classroom, people look at the TurboCAD station and they go, I don't want to do that, it looks boring. And then they get on it and they go, oh wow, that was really cool. When I was your age, I was in a class sort of like this where the station I had to be on was botany, and I was like, botany, I'm going to study plants, I don't want to do that. But I got onto it and I was like, oh my God, I wish I could study this all year long. It was great. Right? So the study of botany, study of plants is actually way more interesting than you might imagine. So we understand pollen, then we understand, all of the things that one would understand if you're going to look at stomach contents, medical, analysis. DNA, we've run DNA on him, right? We know that he has relatives who are alive today in Austria. There are 9 people living in Austria who share his DNA. What else? We know how old he is. How do we do that? Well, you can look at someone's bones and you can determine how old they are. Exactly. He was 46 years old. It's amazing that you can do that, right? When he died. We do carbon dating, so we know he is between 5,200 and 5,400 years old. There's a 200-year window there, plus or minus tolerance that we can look at. Okay, so we round it to 5,300 years ago. Now, that carbon dating sometimes is in question, but not in this case. Because not only did his body carbon date to 5,300 years ago, but so did all of his clothing, his axe, everything he had with him that we carbon dated came out exactly the same. So it's very consistent. That man lived 5,300 years ago. I'm leaving out like so much stuff. Tattoos. He had over 60 tattoos. Nowadays, you guys think tattoos are cool, right? He didn't have tattoos because he thought they were cool. We're not quite sure, but we're pretty sure that it was a type of medical treatment because all of the tattoos take place where we now do acupuncture. By the way, acupuncture, when I was growing up, we always thought of acupuncture as sort of like junk science. It was like sort of like, yeah, sure. But nowadays, acupuncture is taken very seriously as a real medical science. And all the acupuncture points on his body had tattoos on them. So we think that was an early form of acupuncture. Okay, so I have good reason for putting you through all of this. We'll talk about it tomorrow. But if I highly suggest that you go to Google, type in Otzi, and look at the images. It's amazing. There's no end to this story. Okay, with that, you can relax until the bell rings.